Welcome to another vlog in our living room instead of with the ponies today. So I put a question out on our YouTube community and my Instagram to say that we're going to do a Q&A this month and what were the questions that you wanted answered. So we actually got loads of questions and I was really pleased and excited to see so many of you so interested in the channel and interested in endurance and us. So thank you so much for everyone who sent questions in. There were loads, so I don't think we're going to fit them all into one video today, but I'm going to try and cram in as many as I can and keep my answers short and sweet. So without further ado, I have a notebook, I have a pen, so I can tick off the questions as I go along, because you know, I'm organised, I love things like that. And let's get started. Number one, what is your favourite endurance tack brand? So I've used 4 over the years. Plus Equestrian, Performance Equestrian, Zilko, and Pioneer Endurance. And at the moment, my favourite is Pioneer Endurance, and that's what I have on all 3 of my horses at the moment, just because it's really customizable. Zoe is really handy when I have any issues, and it's really, really long wearing, which is almost annoying because I want to buy new tack and I'm like, well, I shouldn't because my current tack is fine, but I'd really like to mix my colours. So yeah, Pioneer Endurance is my favourite endurance tack brand at the moment. Question 2. Hold on, I didn't tick question 1. I've ruined my own system. One moment. Question 2. Which countries have I competed in? So I've been super lucky and I've gone to a few countries in Europe. So I've competed in, obviously the UK, Ireland, Germany, Belgium, Hungary and Spain. And I would love to compete in loads more if I ever get the opportunity. So this question, I think you will all know the answer before I tell you. What is my favourite horse breed? It's Arabs. What is my opinion on riding barefoot? So I've actually never competed barefoot, but I know that loads of people do in endurance, and I think particularly in the States because they've got more stable weather than us. There's a lot of barefoot endurance horses, so I think, yeah, if you can, your horse's feet are good enough and you can manage it really well, yeah, go ahead. What's your worst fall/accident you've had with a horse? So I guess these are 2 different ones for me. I have been, fingers crossed, very lucky in that some of my nastier accidents and falls haven't resulted in horrendous injuries. So my nastiest accident was probably loading a horse when it reared up, and she reared up so high that she was about to fall backwards onto concrete, and I was like, oh god, I don't want her to do that. I thought she might break her neck, so I made a split second decision to reach up, grab her head collar and try and pull her down. But she was so off balance that she then fell sideways and fell on top of me on the concrete, and I hit my head on the concrete and she landed, so half a ton of horse landed straight on top of me. She scrambled up and I literally lay there super winded, and I did like a little body scan wriggle of all my body parts and was like, I feel fine. Whereas she could have sprung my pelvis, or many things could have happened. I did crack my kneecap, sprained, I guess, my ACL ligament. I had a few bruises and was a little bit swollen, but otherwise I actually got off pretty easily for that one. And then my worst riding accident is probably when I was riding along, my horse was being really, really good. A car came past, and that was fine. The car was coming past super slowly, and then something spooked him in the hedge. So he reared up over the bonnet of the car and spun at the same time. I fell off, missed the bonnet of the car, but went kind of underneath the front as the car was still moving towards me, which is a little bit scary. But I was still holding onto the reins because I didn't want to let go because we were on a road. And then I got dragged because I wouldn't let go, and I dislocated my shoulder, broke my finger, scraped all down my side and my leg. I eventually had to let go because my finger was broken and my shoulder was not in its socket, so I couldn't hold on anymore. And then I had to run 2 miles to try and catch the horse before it got to the main road, and we caught him literally about 10 metres before the main road. And as you all know, if you've been watching the channel, I've had quite a few concussions, a few broken ribs, the standard equestrian injuries, but nothing so far, I'm very thankful, nothing too horrendous. 2022 goals for each horse. So for Tizzy, I am going to try training her and taking her to rides barefoot, and we'll see how that goes. I'd like to do probably 3 or 4 pleasure rides, anything between 16 to 32k, just keep her ticking over because she still really, really enjoys it. Qantas, I haven't got any plans. It just depends on his injury, so we'll see how that goes. So I'm not actually planning anything with him. I'm keeping a super open mind. Rue, I would really please complete his novice season. I feel like I've been doing novice seasons on horses since the dawn of time at the moment. And I'd also really like to put him up for Welsh team selection for the Home International, which is like the UK championships. Either doing the 50k or in the 2-day 80. So, watch this space. Next up, how old was I when I started endurance? So I think I did some lead rein, like little pleasure rides with my mum on foot on my Shetland, and I must have been maybe probably 5 or 6 maximum, I think. I don't actually remember when I stopped riding the Shetlands, but I did my first pleasure ride when I was 8 on my pony Amigo, and I did my first competitive ride I think when I was 10 in the year 2000, I think. Okay, this is quite a good one, and actually when I read it I was like, I'm not really sure what to say for this one, but what do I wish I knew when I started? So the thing that came to my mind was, I wish I knew how good Tizzy was going to be so that I could appreciate it more at the time. I know that's impossible, and it's not probably what you meant by the question, but I would have loved to just, I think I took that for granted a little bit. Like, she was so good, we had so much fun, I loved being up for selection, I loved getting on the teams, but I think I kind of expected it with her, like it was almost a given, and I think I took it a little bit for granted. So I wish I'd known that, and to make the most of it a bit more and appreciate it a bit more. But in terms of what I wish I knew in terms of competing, I guess, and I learnt this along the way, and I think lots of people tell you, but when you're in the heat of the moment, it's hard to keep your brain in check, is to ride your own ride. Don't let whatever everyone else is doing influence what you do. Plan your ride your ride, stick to it. If it gets you replacing, awesome. If it gets your horse around sound, excellent, that's what it was for. And if you don't have a good day, at least you rode to your plan. So this one, I think I am pretty good at, and I think I'm a well-informed or well-practiced person to give you an answer for this question. So how do you stay motivated when things go wrong? Eternal optimism. I guess it's looking on the bright side, being kind of a glass half full as much of the time as I can be. Of course I have days where I'm like, oh my god, I don't want to have horses anymore, I just want to sit in a dark room and be sad about it, but I'm not one to really wallow in that. So I do have the odd occasion where I burst into tears and I'm like, this isn't fair anymore. But actually, on the whole, I'm very pragmatic, I'm pretty logical. And I guess what keeps me going is that long-term goal. So yeah, my short-term goals get changed all the time because of horse injuries, human injuries, just general life. But my long-term goal of getting back on a British team, competing at a championship is still there and really, really drives me. I actually had a chat about this with my granddad over the weekend, and he was like, you know, the horses are expensive, you never know if you're getting the right one, and because you're not like a big stable, you can't buy like 15 horses like the bigger like yards do, and then you've got 3 or 4 that end up being really good, so it's taking you loads of time. Why do you still do it? And I literally was just like, because I want it, and I think you've got to want it to get through those hard times. What got me into endurance? This is quite a simple one. So where I grew up was in the middle of nowhere, up a Welsh hill. And it would have taken hours for mum to take me to dressage, cross country or show jumping. And in the backyard, literally, I could hack out of our own yard. We had hundreds of miles of open mountain, countryside, forests to hack around. So great training ground, but also literally a mile down the road was the Welsh team chef to keep for the endurance team. So I was naturally encouraged to do it. The people around me in my life were into endurance, and I had the training facilities, and it was harder to do the other sports. So that's where we went for endurance. This one I think is a really good question. So how do I pace a ride? And I think there was a little bit of comments after it as well, is like, do you trot at the same pace the whole time for the whole ride? And kind of, there was lots of really good questions about this. And actually, no, I don't go at the same speed for the entire ride, because you don't know which sections are going to ride well and which sections you might have to walk over. So I tend to look at the ride's archive history of the average speeds that have got round a ride. So the speed that's the most likely to get you a completion, and then the speeds that are going to most likely get you a win. And then I kind of plan what I'm doing based on what that horse is doing. So if I'm doing it for a qualification, I will go for the most efficient speed for getting completion. If I'm doing it for fun or I want to get a placing, then I will look at the speeds that are going to get a placing. And then I go by my average speed on my GPS watch. And also, my mum is a stickler for this. She will measure the distance between crew points and then give me my maximum and minimum wanted speeds based on the time it takes me to go between those points. So I will walk on sections that need me to walk on. I will canter on good sections, and you really, as you get better at it, you get more experience, you get a feel for how your horse is going and what the average speeds feel like. And as well, in the UK, we do tend to do the same rides over again each season. So as you have done more of those rides and you get used to them, though I'm really bad at remembering a route, even if I've done it the day before, you do get to know which bits you can push on with. And I tend to try and go a little bit faster out on course, the speed that I want my average speed to be, because then your time comes off. Like crew points take a little bit of time up and things like that. So it really is a skill, I guess, and something that you'll learn with time. How much training do I do each week? So this really depends on the season, the horse's goal, where they're at with the training. And I would say each horse is trained a minimum of 3 times a week and a maximum of 5 or 6. So in like my most intense training schemes, I ride 4 days on, 1 day off. My middle ground is day on, day off. And then my lower end of the kind of training schedule, I guess, is 3 days a week. So it really, really depends on the season and the horse's goals. Okay, there were quite a few questions about how Azide is doing. So someone asked, have I sold Azide and how is he doing? Azide isn't sold quite yet, but he kind of is. So we did an agreement. I didn't want to sell him outright because I thought if someone had him and bought him and it turned out that he wasn't right for them or they didn't get on, then he'd just be sold on. I'd have no power or control over what happened to him. But just loaning him out, I felt like, you know, some people maybe think that they can just hand the horse back if it doesn't work out and maybe don't put as much effort in. I don't think that's probably true, but I just felt a little bit uneasy about pure loaning. So we went for a middle ground. So he's actually being leased. So they're paying me monthly and we're doing that for a whole year. If they want to keep him, they'll pay me the rest of his sales price. If they don't want to keep him, he'll come back to me. So I think that works really well for me. It works really well for his owner and also for his well-being and to make sure he doesn't get passed on or go to somewhere that, you know, he doesn't suit. And he's getting on really, really well. They did a pleasure ride at the end of the season and had a really good time. Someone asked, how do I fit in working full-time and horses? I guess the simple answer is very little social life and a very supportive fiance. Yes, he's not my boyfriend anymore. He is my fiance. I couldn't do it without him and my family, like cooking meals in the evening, helping out with stuff so that I have time to do the horses. So I work a 37.5-hour week. I do the mornings before I go to work are more about my training, and the evenings are about horses. And I usually get in about 7:30, 8. And then if I'm doing some long training in the peak of the season, I might not get in till 9. And I guess it helps that I don't have children. Okay, this I thought was it. I know I've said this for a few questions now, but you guys asked really good questions. Is there anything I wish I'd spent more time on in training when doing a race? Loads of stuff crop up, I bet, but I can't really think of many off the top of my head apart from this one. And I guess this is actually really hard to practice for me or anyone else, depending on your circumstances. I wish I'd done more speed work in a group of horses. So most of my training is by myself, but when you go to a ride, you actually, especially at races, you're doing kind of medium to fast canter in a big group. And sometimes, because I haven't practiced that at all until I go to races, sometimes it's a little bit awkward because you're trying to pace it another horse's stride, or the horse isn't used to being in a pack. So I'd really like to try with my future horses, once they get up to that level, to maybe try and do some more training in a group and more speed training in a group. I think this question must have been asked by someone from America, because they have asked, what are my blanketing preferences? So for the UK, we call it rugging. We put rugs on horses, and I do believe in America they call it a blanket. I prefer rugs mainly because I'm lazy, and it saves me time grooming. It keeps them less muddy. And also in the summer, I prefer putting a fly rug on because I don't want them to be bitten by a horsefly somewhere where the tack would be, and that screws up training, so I'd rather put a rug on. In the winter, if they've got their fluff on, so they're not clipped, then I go for a 0 or a 50 gram, depending kind of, I guess, on the horse themselves, like age, like how much forage they've got out there, what weight they've got on. So a super lightweight rug that's just waterproof, and they live out in that all the time. If they're clipped, then I'll put like a 200 gram rug on. And Tizzy, because she's a little bit older now, does have a much heavier weight than she's ever had before, because she loses weight easier, so I want to keep the weight on her. So she has a 350 and a 400, or is it a 400? She's got a heavier weight rug, and she wears that through the winter. I'd love to give you the sciencey answer for this, but I haven't done the research. Is there a particular age when an Arab excels at endurance? I'm sure if you went through all the FEI stats, you'd find like an average age of the horses that are top notch. But for me, I think it's between 10 and 15. They've matured enough, they've got experience, you're starting to go into the realms of racing for placings rather than qualifications, and they're kind of in their prime, I think, at that age. Okay, 3 to go. If you could have a foal from any 2 horses, who would you choose? Well, I think Rue is actually that foal. So Felena Bint Shatans was an amazing mare when I was a junior, and Castlebar Gulfstream is a pretty good, understatement, endurance stallion and has some good prodigy. But if I was going to create my own foal, I would have loved to have a foal out of Tizzy and a British endurance stallion who unfortunately passed away recently, called Murmansk. I would have loved a foal from those 2. Another USA question, they asked, what are the kilometer rides in miles, because I can't work it out. This boggles my mind too because of maths. So 16 kilometres is 10 miles, 40 kilometres is 25 miles, 50 kilometres is 30 miles, 64 is 40, 80 kilometres is 50 miles, 120 is 75, and 160 kilometres is 100 miles. And lastly, what's the best thing about endurance? There are so many things. What is the one best thing? I think the one best thing would be how well I have to know my horse, how developed your relationship has to be, and the amount of time I get to spend with them in glorious scenery and the places that endurance has taken me. That was quite a few, wasn't it? But I love endurance, what can I say? That is the end of our first Q&A. I'm sure that maybe we will do some more in the future because I didn't get to answer everyone's questions, and I'm really, really sorry if I didn't answer yours. if I didn't, just pop your question again down below, or DM me on Instagram, and I will answer as many as I can. Hope you are having a lovely day, and we'll see you next time.